In the heart of East Asia, a storm is brewing. North Korea, a nation shrouded in secrecy, has kicked its war machine into overdrive. Missile tests light up in the sky. Soldiers march in chilling precision. And the words coming from Pyongyang's leadership are more aggressive than ever. But this is not just a political show. Behind the bluster lies a disturbing reality, one that could shake the world. What is pushing North Korea to the brink? Is it mere posturing, or is there a darker, more dangerous agenda unfolding? To understand the truth, we must unravel decades of hostility, broken agreements, and a nation trapped in a perpetual state of war readiness. The story of North Korea's military obsession begins in the aftermath of World War II. After Japan's surrender in 1945, the Korean peninsula was divided along the 38th parallel. The northern half fell under Soviet influence, while the south was backed by America. What began as a temporary division soon hardened into a permanent geopolitical fracture. As Cold War tensions between the two superpowers deepened, the ideological divide between North and South Korea was not just political, it was personal. Families were separated, livelihoods disrupted, and the nation that had endured decades of Japanese colonial rule found itself fractured along lines drawn by foreign powers. In the North, Kim Il sung, a former anti Japanese guerrilla fighter, emerged as a leader under Soviet backing. In the South, America supported the regime of Syngman Rhee. Tensions boiled over June 25, 1950, when North Korean forces, led by Kim Il sung, launched a surprise invasion of the South. This marked the beginning of the Korean War, a brutal conflict that lasted 3 years and left the peninsula in ruins. Cities were reduced to rubble, villages were razed. The war saw massive intervention from foreign powers. America led a United Nations coalition to defend South Korea, while China sent hundreds of thousands of troops to support the North. The Soviet Union, though not directly involved in combat, provided critical military aid to Kim Il sung's forces. For ordinary citizens, the war was a nightmare of an unimaginable suffering. Families were torn apart, and many were never reunited. Refugees fled by the millions, seeking shelter from relentless bombing campaigns. Saw the South Korean capital change hands multiple times during the conflict, becoming a symbol of the war's ferocity and devastation. The Korean peninsula became a testing ground for modern warfare. It was the first real test of the Cold War. Historian Bruce Cummings once wrote, and for the Korean people, it was a catastrophe. The conflict was not just a clash of armies, it was a battle over the future of an entire nation, with both sides willing to endure immense suffering to achieve their ideological goals. Though the fighting ended in 1953 with an armistice agreement, no formal peace treaty was signed. Technically, North and South Korea remain at war today. The heavily fortified demilitarized zone separates the two countries. The scars of the Korean War run deep in North Korea's collective psyche. The leadership in Pyongyang has used the war's legacy to justify its militarization and its pursuit of nuclear weapons. Ask yourself this: how would you feel living in a nation that believes war could break out again at any moment? For North Korea, this fear is not paranoia, it's deeply ingrained reality. Decades after the guns fell silent, the specter of the Korean War still looms large, shaping how the nation sees itself and the world around it. The conflict may have ended on paper, but for North Korea, it remains an unfinished chapter in their national history. After the war, Kim Il sung established a government rooted in a philosophy called Jungshi, or a self-reliance. This doctrine became the foundation of North Korea's identity. The message was clear: the world cannot be trusted. and only through military strength can the nation survive. Under Kim Il sung's leadership, the country became isolated from the global community, promoting a narrative that foreign powers, especially America and South Korea, were constant threats to North Korean sovereignty. And that is true. When Kim Il died, his son Kim Jong il became the new government. Despite doubts about his leadership abilities, Kim Jong il quickly consolidated power by relying on the Korean People's Army and expanding the role of the military in government affairs. The military first policy, or Song-un, elevated the armed forces above all other institutions and became the defining feature of his rule. Under Kim Jong il's rule, North Korea accelerated its nuclear program. Why? Because, in Pyongyang's eyes, nuclear weapons were the ultimate insurance policy against foreign invasion. The collapse of the Soviet Union and the resulting loss of economic aid deepened North Korea's paranoia. The Gulf War of 1991, which showcased American military dominance, reinforced the belief that only a nuclear deterrent could prevent regime change. By the early 2000s, North Korean officials openly stated that nuclear weapons were essential to their survival. Without nuclear weapons, we are vulnerable to American aggression, a North Korean official said. When Kim Jong il died in 2011, his younger son, Kim Jong un, inherited the regime. Kim Jong un has taken North Korea's military ambitions to an entirely new level. Missile tests, nuclear detonations, and bold threats to South Korea and Japan, and even America, have become regular occurrences. Under his leadership, North Korea has developed intercontinental ballistic missiles capable of reaching the US. Yet questions remains. Is this aggressive posture merely bluster to keep the regime in power? Or does Kim Jong-un genuinely believe that war is inevitable? Analysts are divided. Some argue that the military provocations are carefully calibrated to extract economic concessions and diplomatic recognition while ensuring internal loyalty. Others believe that Kim dynasty views military conflict as an unavoidable outcome of its struggle for survival. For decades, external forces have tried to bend North Korea to their will. America, South Korea, and their allies have used sanctions, military exercises, and diplomatic isolation to pressure the regime. From the Korean War armistice in 1953 to the present day, North Korea has remained a focal point of global security concerns, with foreign powers attempting to curtail its nuclear ambitions and contain its influence. But these tactics may have backfired. Every time the world tries to tighten the noose, and by the world here means the West, North Korea responds with more aggression. Missile launches become bolder, military drills become more elaborate. It's a cycle of provocation and punishment that shows no sign of stopping. The more pressure exerted from outside, meaning from the West, the more the regime frames its nuclear program as a matter of survival. Sanctions, which aimed at crippling the country's economy, have not led to the collapse of North Korea. Instead, it has adapted, turning to illicit trade networks, cybercrime, and closer ties with sympathetic nations such as Russia and China. Consider this. When Muammar Gaddafi gave up his weapons program in exchange for security guarantees, he was later overthrown. North Korea learned a chilling lesson. Disarmament will inevitably embolden external forces to overthrow and destroy the country, meaning North Korea. From Pyongyang's perspective, nuclear weapons are not just tools of power. They are the ultimate insurance policy against regime change. Other examples reinforce this belief. The 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq, which toppled Saddam Hussein under the pretext of weapons of mass destruction, sent shockwaves through North Korea's leadership. Saddam's regime fell quickly and he was later captured and executed. These outcomes have led North Korean officials to view nuclear armaments as the only reliable deterrent against a similar fate. Furthermore, North Korea cites the continuing US military presence and regular joint exercises as evidence that an invasion is always a possibility. Each year, large scale drills like Yulki Freedom Shield and Fall Eagle are portrayed by the North as rehearsals for war. In response, the regime stages its own military demonstrations, including the testing of its ICBMs, capable of reaching America. This dangerous tit for tat cycle keeps tensions simmering on the Korean Peninsula with the constant risk of miscalculation. Despite numerous diplomatic efforts, including summits between Kim Jong un and Donald Trump, no lasting agreement has been reached. Each breakdown in negotiations only strengthens North Korea's conviction that dialogue is a trap and that giving up their nuclear arsenal would be suicidal. The shadow of foreign intervention looms large over North Korea's policies and actions. As long as external powers continue their pressure campaigns, the regime is unlikely to relinquish its nuclear ambitions. To North Korea, the lessons of history are clear. Only through military strength can they ensure their survival in an uncertain world dominated by the West. So, why is North Korea preparing for war now? Some analysts believe that North Korea is not merely bluffing. Instead, they argue that Kim Jong un views war as a real possibility, perhaps even an eventuality. We must always be ready, Kim Jong un declared in 2022. But here is the terrifying part. North Korea does not just want to defend itself, it wants to reunify the Korean Peninsula on its own terms, and that ambition could lead to catastrophic consequences. Imagine a scenario where miscalculation, a stray missile, or a border skirmish, or a misunderstanding sparks a full scale war. With nuclear weapons in play, the consequences would be unimaginable. North Korea's preparations for war are not random, they are the result of historical trauma, international pressure, and a desperate desire for survival.